Good evening and welcome to Harmony at Home. I'm so glad you're with us tonight to experience the Wednesday night experience. We have a special program tonight with two special guests. We've got our own Brian Nugent from the Avon Police Department and his friend Ramil. They have a great story. I can't wait for you to hear it as they share it tonight. And it's all about having victory in your life. So as we sing tonight, we're going to sing Sea of Victory. And you can strive for that victory no matter what you're going through now. So sing out with me as we sing. Sing with me now. There's weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. My God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Listen now. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. No, I'm not backing down from any giant. I know how this story ends. I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Think about that now. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. We're so excited about tonight as we leave this song. Pay attention to this video and it'll tell you all you need to know.
Ongoing series of More Perfect Union, we bring you stories that show how what unites us as Americans is far greater than what divides us. This morning, Adriana Diaz introduces us to a young Indianapolis man whose surprising decision led to an unlikely friendship.
You look good. You all right, buddy? You all right?
An unexpected bond is building in Avon, Indiana.
You looking good.
Between 23-year-old Ramil Patamber, who's rebuilding his life after prison, and Brian Nugent, the deputy police chief here.
It's a lot I'm trying to learn and unlearn. I need a mentor who can get me to where I want to be, who can teach me what I need to know, and he answered all that.
Was the fact that he was a police officer a plus?
Yes. My goal was to not go back to prison, but I didn't 100% know what to do to not go back to prison. And I knew that he knew that.
Like he's the expert in what to do not to go back to prison. 6.5 years ago, Ramil was a 17-year-old honor student struggling with the death of his father.
I was lost and had a lot to prove. I felt like to prove it, I had to be tough. I was a follower, and one poor decision led to the next.
He robbed a Little Caesars at gunpoint with the help of a friend who worked there.
911, where's your emergency? We just got robbed and held up with a gun.
Ramil was arrested and later convicted of felony armed robbery and criminal confinement. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison.
I didn't believe it. I just started crying immediately.
Why didn't you believe it?
Because my son robbing someone, that just wasn't his character.
Officer Nugent knows the story well because he was the officer who arrested Ramil.
You know, very few cases that you work do you forget, and Ramil was just very memorable.
During Ramil's time in prison, his mother, Daphne Harris, insisted on staying in touch with Officer Nugent.
I needed him to know that he wasn't just another kid in trouble, some little ghetto kid that you would think. You know, I needed him to know that he has a home, he has a family, he has a support system. This is who my son is.
And you didn't want him to think your son was a stereotype.
Exactly.
After he was released early for good behavior, Ramil wanted to get into home improvement and real estate, but felt he needed a mentor to help. Then one day, while working at Goodwill, a familiar face dropped off a donation.
So I just asked him, like, hey, are you Detective Brian? And I was just like, hey, it's me. How you doing?
I mean, you greeted him like a long-lost friend.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What did you think when he asked you to be a mentor?
So that's never happened to me. I said, look, you know, I'm happy to do it, but there's going to be some rules. You know, we talked about we're going to touch base every month. We're going to go out for lunch. We're going to have conversations. Accountability is such a huge part of that.
Who told you about those nachos?
Coming back out of prison and finding employment. We talked about that. How does he encounter the questions that he might get about his background? When do you volunteer some of that stuff? When do you hold back on some of that?
And what did he teach you about that?
The first thing that stuck in my mind was that if I view myself as less than Ramil, then I'm less than Ramil. I can't be mad at you to treat me how I treat myself. I'm not ex-convict, I'm not just black, I'm not just Pakistani, I'm Ramil.
What did you think about cops growing up? What were you taught?
Never to talk to them, never to trust them. They lie and they arrest you. That's what people told me, but after interacting with Brian, then that's not the case.
I hope that people can see with everything that's going on is all it takes is respect on both sides. It's more good kids out there than bad. It's more good police out there than bad.
Ramil now has a steady job doing heating and air.
I want something out of life. I want to be successful and I want to be truly free.
He's also renovating his own home and going to school.
I think the change that I see the most in him is his confidence. There's no better reward in this job than helping somebody succeed and achieve those goals in their lives.
You don't blame him? You weren't angry at him?
Never, never. He treated me with compassion and understanding He never treated me less than, not once. To this day, he still builds my worth and self-esteem. With him in my corner, I can do anything.
Anything with an unlikely mentor by his side. For CBS This Morning, Adriana Diaz, Avon, Indiana.
Compassion.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
Kids need attention, doesn't matter where it comes from.
It's absolutely.
Well, hey, here this evening on Harmony at Home, we are thrilled to have something to kind of just push away from some of the chaos and all the things that are floating around that fill our minds. It's Wednesday, and by Wednesday in the week, we are all always in need of something that kind of lifts us up and pours some positive energy into us. And tonight, that is what we have the opportunity to do. Tonight we have Assistant Chief of Police Officer Brian Nugent with us, and we are thrilled to have him here with us. He's an attender, he's a member here at Avon, and he was willing to sit here next to me tonight, which I'm thankful for.
That's the big ask.
Exactly. And we have a very special guest with us tonight, Ramil Pitamber. I was close, right?
We worked very hard on that pronunciation.
I'm slow, but that's all right.
It was good.
And Ramil is a friend of Brian's, and he's a friend of mine, a friend of Harmony as well. Had the opportunity to meet him and get to know him about the past year and a half, and it's been an awesome thing just to sit back and watch you grow and see some incredible things taking place in your life. They've got some unique stories and some unique things that have taken place in their life, and I'm just going to ask Brian to start us off this evening.
Yeah, first of all, it's just, we're always very appreciative of the concept of it being able to share the story, and I think sometimes we get wrapped up in so many of our social issues that we have a tendency to kind of lose sight of what's important. And I can tell you the last couple of years, knowing Ramil, in our story itself, it happened very organically. When we had a conversation talking about our relationship, we didn't envision things like this happening, right? It was just conversation. So I think the crux of the story that we just saw on the CBS, they did a great job on that segment, but it doesn't necessarily give justice to our backgrounds. And I think that's kind of what most people are most interested when they talk to us about, why does this relationship work and what are you doing with it? So, for me, I wasn't always born and raised in Avon. I'm originally from Southern Indiana, and so down in Tell City, Indiana is where I'm from. Born and raised and grew up, went to school in Southern Indiana area, Vincennes University and University of Evansville. And, when I applied for the position at Avon, I was in the academy. I was in the process of working for Tell City Police Department, and kind of knowing what my career path was brought me to that point where I was in Central Indiana. And so my background was Southern Indiana. There wasn't a lot of diverse culture down here. You talk about things like cultural competency and how do you engage with people that look different than you and from different backgrounds. And I wasn't in that position until I was really in college. I was very fortunate to have a family that was very supportive of pursuing formal education. And so for myself, I met a lot of people throughout that time frame that really kind of changed and opened my eyes to the fact that we can come from very different backgrounds but still have a lot in common. And so that prepared me for the career, and I started at Avon in 2003. I found myself going into the investigations division within the first 2 years that I was there. Just had some opportunities that presented themselves, and I spent about just short of 10 years in that office. Remember a lot of cases that I worked, a lot of people that I met, both through some very difficult circumstances and some pretty triumphant ones as well. And so for me and my life experience, it all builds every day. What I see, what I learn, what I'm trying to learn from others, or to share those stories. And so it was in early 2012, 2013 that I had a particular case that led me to meeting Ramil and understanding that he had made some bad decisions in his life that brought us together in that sense. But after that took place, we had a remarkable encounter afterwards. So, my background is pretty boring. I get made fun of for being boring sometimes, especially by John. But
I would never.
Yeah. Don't believe that. That's not true at all. But I'm really proud of the fact that our relationship has evolved to this point. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities we've had to share that. But I know Ramil's story is much different than that.
Well, absolutely, and one of the things that I just want to kind of say real quick is my story, my experience is different than yours.
Yeah.
I grew up here in the Avon community,
Yeah.
went to church on a regular basis. So you talk about your life being boring. Mine was kind of not boring from a standpoint of boring, just different than what you would have experienced at that point in time. We're closer to a bigger city, but our communities were probably much more the same than what you might think at that point in time because of how Avon has changed. But mine would have been a different experience than yours, and mine and yours both a different experience than Ramil. So Ramil, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I can first say that my life has been exciting. My life has not been boring, but before I get to that, when you said that I have been an example for you to growth and change, I want to also say that you personally restored my faith in pastors. From the first time I met you, I had left my church home because of some comments that they made towards the youth, and you made me more comfortable and showed that pastors can be just a man and a human being also. So I never told you that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and that's important for all of us to remember, because tonight all three of us are Christ followers, but no matter what we do, we're going to have great moments, and we're going to have moments where we struggle. And we can't let one person kind of define something. So I appreciate you sharing that this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you. But a little bit about my story. Well, I don't know who all is actually watching that's a part of my family, so you may hear some things that is foreign to you, but I had a pretty difficult childhood, riddled with abuse and sexual abuse and alcoholism and drugs, which led to a lot of poor decisions because of the internalization of negative emotions. So, I lacked self-esteem and stuff like that and insecurities, which led me to be a follower, and I pursued a life of petty crime. Never really a good criminal. Clearly, I didn't get too far. But
you were just up against a pretty good force, is what you meant to say, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. But I went through rough changes in adolescence and stuff like that. And in order to fit in, I wanted to be tough and cool. So it led to me robbing Little Caesars and Avon and tying the people up, which we may joke and laugh, but we don't make light of the situation. We moved past it. And they have too, because I spoke with some of them also. But that's what led me to my first encounter with you guys, or with you specifically.
Yeah. I know in general, we've had conversations before about, how that path kind of led to be. And, for anyone that may have known the story beforehand, at the time that the story is being written, you don't really have any idea where it's going to go, right? Like during our first encounter, I remember making contact with you at your grandmother's house that evening, and we're all creatures of habit in the sense we're trying to read and understand people. Like from my perspective, I'm always trying to read. Am I dealing with somebody that's respectful? Am I dealing with somebody that's going to recognize issues that need to be addressed and all of that sort of conversation? I'm sure you probably felt pretty similar about that with me in terms of how is this guy going to be? He's a cop. Is he going to be rough? Is he going to be approachable? And I'm sure we both were kind of reading each other through all of that process. But the case is what it is. I think what stuck out to me the most was remembering us in the interview room. And this is a time at 1:30 in the morning on a weekday where we're sitting there. No one else is around. There's very little engagement with other people. And I just remember going home that night after we were done and remembering to myself that I had met a young man that I felt really took responsibility for everything that he did. And it was very apparent to me during our interview, and because of Ramil's age, he was a juvenile, so we had to follow particular laws about advisement of rights and interviewing opportunities and all of that. And so I think what I can say that night when I went home and the next day when I reflected on it was that this young man had what most of us would call the perfect mother, right? The mom that's always looking out for you. I think you'd agree, right?
You better.
Right. She's probably
now
watching.
Now is a good moment to agree with him. Yes.
Yeah, she told me I better tell on myself.
Tell on yourself. There you go. But I think in general, what stuck with me was the character, and knowing that you can come from a good home, to know that you can have a mother that cares for you, you can have friends that may be there to an extent, and then they may leave you when things go bad. And I just remember thinking to myself, at his age, being a teenager at the time when it happened, yes, there was bad things that happened, and we had to talk about that, we had to address that, but it just stuck with me, and I wish I could articulate why any differently. When you see someone that's a teenager sitting in a room, and either between now or 6, 7, 8 years ago, to see someone take responsibility, to me, it seems to be more and more of a rare occasion or an observation. And so that for me was kind of what the message that I had in my eyes, right, in my mind, and everything that I had in our relationship. But I wouldn't have ever guessed, years later, and literally I left this church right after a Sunday morning service. My wife and I had some items that we wanted to donate to Goodwill, and that's how we met each other again. And so you just never know where that full circle comes in at. I remember the time that we physically met. You asked me if I remembered you. We actually gave each other a hug. I couldn't believe it. And I remember coming back to my car, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. And my oldest daughter was with me, and she's trying to figure out, what just happened.
She's trying to figure out why you were crying.
She probably was, yeah. She knows I'm hardcore though, so there's that. That was probably even more confusing.
He tried to leave that part out.
I did.
He seen me and started crying.
I did. But again, you just never know where the path brings you. And for me, that's what I remember the most about Ramil. And then just knowing that through all of the news media, through the drama, the hardships, whatever traumas he had been through, whatever conversations he had had, once we can weave through all of that, there's a deeper issue, and there's also a deeper person in that. And sometimes that's not really easy to see. But years later, when you kind of put two and two together, you realize the first thing he said to me after he introduced himself at Goodwill was, "Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for how you treated me." And so that was, it was kind of that moment for you as a public servant, whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, an EMT, a nurse or whatever, where you feel like you always reach out to somebody, but when they walk away, you don't really know if you made that connection. So I'm sure you felt similar to that too.
Yeah, I think it all ties together. When you talk about the responsibility, me taking responsibility, and you made a comment when we first started talking about our lives are our background is a lot more interesting. I think a lot of the times the coverage we get on our friendship and our relationship, it just shows, a arresting officer is mentoring and friends with the person he arrested, when it's so much more deeper than that. Yeah. Like the background is truly interesting, which puts us in a position to be able to relate and encourage and spread hope to others. Because the reason I took responsibility is because I try to move off principles, and I was wrong. I was wrong in what I did, and there was no beating it. So why not hit it head on? But that driving factor is something that allows us to meet you organically at Goodwill and say, okay, I need a mentor. Brian can be my mentor. And we built a true and strong bond. So I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, let's just kind of describe some of the mentoring that took place. You talk about Brian being willing to be a mentor.
Right.
If it's okay and it's not prying too much, just kind of share some of those things.
So I initially knew I needed a mentor. I didn't know it would be Brian. But when I first got out of prison, I was uncomfortable around white people. Yeah. I was very segregated in prison, and I could not be comfortable and secure around white people. I just couldn't. I couldn't talk. I couldn't relate anymore. It was just broken, and I knew that is not safe mentality or healthy. So I met Brian at Goodwill, and then let me rewind just a little bit. So I knew I needed someone that can also help me to produce productive thoughts that keep me out of prison. So it started with, conversation, how to have conversation, how to talk in interviews, how to address the situation, how to see yourself, how to move, I think the first mentoring process was rebuilding self-esteem. And because I was extremely insecure about being an ex-felon.
Yeah.
And how the world will view you, and where I can work at, where I can live at. And so that was, self-esteem was a big one. And then we moved on to like fundamentals in the workplace and minor things, we moved after that, we just moved on to fundamentals, and then it just moves on to advice. So what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Right now, he's trying to get me to stop drinking, but I don't drink a lot. No. So that's where we're at now. So the latest lesson was what's in the club. Right. So because I'm young, I'm about to be 25, so I have an occasional social beer, to clarify. So but he was really, really big on about what is in the club, what is in the bar. So I recently made the decision if I want to socially drink, to drink at a restaurant, because the nightlife is what is productive about the night. What did you do productive at the club? That's what he's been drilling consistently.
So getting back to really personal choice and saying what is in this for me that's value, where is this going to take me? And that's something that I think maybe all of us just can stop right now tonight and say, look, some of the choices that we're making, where's it going to take us? I listened to Andy Stanley share a message this past weekend, and he was really addressing some of the things that are going on, not only in our nation but around the world. And he boiled it down to this: I can't control what everybody else is doing, but I can do my best to control the experience that people have with me. And one of the things that I think is absolutely incredible about your story is that truth boiled down. You controlled what kind of experience Ramil would have with you, how he would remember you, and you controlled what kind of experience Brian would have with you. And you really just went ahead and said, look, we can help control this experience at this point in time, and we're going to operate from that, and we're going to kind of build from there. So I think that's an extremely healthy relationship and a really powerful aspect to look at some things. So Brian, let's talk about the mentoring thing from maybe your standpoint.
Yeah.
Because he's saying, look, here's this guy, that's helping.
Can I piggy before you answer that? What you said about personal choice is one of my core beliefs, that it is my responsibility to take responsibility for my life and my choices. When you talked about what the guy said last night, or what you read, it is absolutely imperative, because it's your responsibility to make your choice, own your experience, and own your emotions, because if you don't, then how do you learn the lesson? If I don't take responsibility, if anyone does not take responsibility for the situation that they are in, how do you ever grow from that? Yeah. No matter what the situation is, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter on any platform, on any side of the street, if no one's taking responsibility, where's the growth? Yeah. So you're definitely...
Yeah, absolutely. And that's powerful. That if we're not taking responsibility, where is the growth going to come from? That's great.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about the mentorship, what that looked like, and there's a lot of different stories that we could share, about some one-off conversations that we had, or some encounters that we had. When you watch the CBS clip, I think was what we started with. I think it was like a 4-minute video. When you try to take a relationship that started and has continued to grow to this point over the course of several years, 4 minutes is a pretty tight crunch to put that in, And so, at first, kind of like we talked about in the video with CBS News, it was, well, what does this look like? I articulated that it's never happened to me before. And I think the lesson I learned from this, my relationship with Ramil was, how many times do people really actually just ask for help? And sometimes we indicate that asking for help is a sign of weakness. In my opinion, it's, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses is nice, but maybe your biggest strength is just simply the ability to recognize your weakness and knowing when to ask for help. And I couldn't imagine any circumstance that people would say no to that, right? So it wasn't necessarily just an outward mentorship to try to help a young man try to get back on track. For me, he's poured back into my life in a lot of different ways. You talked about a lot of the questions. He talked about, hey, I'm working at this job. I've got a guy that I work with. He's a little difficult personality. He made a couple comments. I didn't know what to make of him. How should I respond to that? How do I stand up for myself? How do I show leadership in the workplace but not, step out of my lane or make something worse? And so, internally, those are the same questions that I have at work. Those are the same hardships that I know several people that, whether you're in a profession that a lot of people can see from the outside, or maybe you're just more of an internal working. How do you operate that, right? How do you navigate through that process? And so a lot of times he'd ask me a question and I find myself going, oh, that's a good question, man. But it's self-growth for myself, right? If he's asking a question about, how do I expand my integrity? How do I let other people know, despite my background, I have integrity? And so it's challenged me to look at myself internally and think, that's a hard question to answer. But, we pieced it out. We talked more about it. And, I think for me, the mentorship, I grew just as much as you did, Ramil. I really do. I feel that very much so. I mean, even in all the circumstances and conversations we've had, and we've had some kind of funny one-off things that never made it into that 4-minute clip that we just watched. I know one of the things we talked about was he never had a driver's license, right? So we had an opportunity to learn how to drive. And I remember the parallel parking, that was the big stress, right?
So this guy helped you parallel park?
He taught me how to parallel park.
Darn right I did.
Yeah. I don't know how he learned the way he drives. But
whatever. I know we're live, but can we edit that part out?
He abuses the sirens. But I think out of all the fundamental things that he taught me, I think the smallest thing that stayed with me was make sure your shoes match your belt. Like he always doesn't give it the significance that I do.
So he's giving fashion advice.
Yeah.
Right.
Is your shirt tucked in?
Hey, that's why we're below the table. So don't ask that question.
It was. He taught me conservative colors because he gave me this example of why go to an interview in an oversized blue suit. The best looking, you're not there to be the best dressed, you're there to, let them learn you. But that really is what stayed with me out of any lesson. Make sure your shoes match your belt. That has stayed with me more than anything else.
So he's helped you with driving, helped you in preparing for some job interviews and getting ready. It's my understanding that you're getting prior to going through some of this, you were getting job offers after interviews.
Yes, so right now I work for myself. But at the time when we were working in the workforce, every job I interviewed for I got the offer.
Yeah.
Every single job. And it's crazy because, so I would use the techniques that he taught me, and I would get in front of the felony, and then they would bring in the owner or someone on like the board of directors because they couldn't make the decision. So every owner hired me or wanted to hire me, which was amazing. But
well, and I think that pays dividend to the fact that they see your character, right? I mean, when you're able to look past, and that's why I love the opportunity for people to have questions and answers and see you and engage, because I think we're all guilty of looking at something or someone and having an expectation of how they're going to act, right? And so for me, I think the power in your speaking and the message that you can bring to hope to others is that you have the ability to let people know that, yes, you went through a very difficult time, but look at me today. And you look at what that resolve was. And that's because, in my opinion, people see your personality, that you choose to be happy and that you don't choose to live your life as a victim,
And let's talk about not choosing to live your life as a victim. It's my understanding, well, it's not my understanding. I know you guys went to Baton Rouge, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that if this is a good time to go into it, because I think it may be.
So we, as the story started to gain a little bit of traction here in Indianapolis, one of the news stations, Channel 13, I think, came out and called us first and said, hey, we know a little bit about this story that's going on. We'd like to talk to you. As a public information officer with our police department, for me, I have to be very mindful that that there's a divide in terms of personal versus professional. But irregardless of that, when there's interest to showcase somebody like Ramil's decision making, that's kind of how it happens. So The story ran initially in Indianapolis News District, I think in the month of February of 19, and the communication between everybody who watched the story, it ended up on the CBS segment that we started with tonight. And it was about, for the next week after that national story ran, I got flooded with phone calls and emails, and people saying, hey, we saw this story. I had people from every corner of the nation sending us emails and asking us more questions about the story, and, you know, good for you, good for him. A lot of people came out of the woodwork, wanted to be supportive of his passion for working on homes and the HVACs and all of that. And so as that came about, one of the calls I got was from a program director with a program called Recast, and it was in Baton Rouge. So I get a phone call, and essentially what we have is a group of people in Baton Rouge that have a grant that's given from the federal government. And the whole preface or platform of the grant is these are communities that have suffered a significant amount of trauma. And how can we bring in people to show that we can get past trauma, whether it's the race component, whether it's the police versus community component, or maybe just the generalities of the hardships that he's had to deal with and what path he'd led him on. So I know we have a couple pictures of that incident down in, or of the presentation down in Baton Rouge. But this young man took the stage in Baton Rouge and lectured a hall full of people and talked about the value of choosing not to live your life like a victim. Because it's so appealing that if I declare myself to be a victim of anything, that I can adopt a sense of disownership, if you would, right? And I can carry this bag, metaphorically, that no matter what happens to me, under any circumstance, I can use this bag of excuses, and then I can do whatever I want to. And that's the personal choice that Ramil talks about. So when Baton Rouge, Louisiana calls and says, we want to fly you down, he's sitting, and some of the pictures that we had, he's face-to-face with the mayor. He's face-to-face with the police chief of Baton Rouge, and they have had a lot of turmoil, a lot of distrust. And sharing his story and knowing that, you know, people that work in public service and safety can reach out to people that are going through that and give them the hope, you know, give them the opportunity to pour into them a little bit more and give them the resources that they need. And I remember sitting on the stage and in the crowd and watching Ramil talk and just being so open and honest and knowing that other people in that room have probably lived some of those same traumas, but they don't have the comfort or the confidence or whatever that may be to talk outwardly about that. I think it opened a lot of doors for people to say, you know, thanks for sharing with me that you were a victim of these types of circumstances. What can we do to be better? And to watch Ramil not worry about the microphones, the cameras, the people, the photo ops. I mean, to just look at a mother and say, do X, Y, and Z. You know, don't do this, don't do that. This is what he needs. This is what you don't need. And so just to sit back and watch that, to me, is just incredible. So, you know, the Baton Rouge opportunity was right at about a year ago now that we went down there and spoke. And so there's a whole other dimension to everything that we've talked about. But I think that's the biggest choice, John, like you talk about, was choosing not to live life like a victim. And that was the message I think you brought down there pretty well.
I know that prior to going to Baton Rouge, I had the opportunity to hear some of your story, to hear some of the things that you were planning on sharing there. But why don't you just kind of recap what's there? Just share with us, you know, how you shared in Baton Rouge.
So basically, I explained to them the background of my grandfather and about pathology and the cultural barriers that were existing before I was even born. My grandfather was he was born on the border of Afghanistan, where the majority of women would already be raped and the men would be killed. And this is what he was born into. And this is what he was groomed around and learned and developed. So it produced generational curses, which passed down to my father, which my father was an alcoholic. So the trauma from that extended to that, but then it extended to my parents not being together, which extended to other things, which led to victim of sexual abuse because you may have to work or this or that, or a victim of my dad might get drunk and get a little too mad, something like that. But basically, we shared the aspects of that, and I opened up to them myself to let them know that it's okay. This is how you spot it. But you still need to understand that it's okay. You still need to make a choice. The one driving factor was personal change. We were on the stage with the police chief, the mayor, and various other people of the nonprofits, and they were more interested in asking questions directed towards me and Brian about personal choice than hearing what the mayor and police chief had to say. I mean, because you can instill hope, because hope is a choice also. Yeah. But basically, we just shared that. Did that answer your question?
Well, it does answer my question, and I know that I got to hear your story, and at some point in time, people will get to hear more of your story because you're going to have more of an opportunity to tell it, because it's a powerful story, and we don't have maybe not quite the format that we would want to share your complete story in this evening. But when you stop and look, you made the choice to say, I'm going to take personal responsibility. I've had a dad that didn't provide everything that needed to be provided as far as an ideal home environment and the nurture and the love and those kind of things. And those are your words, not mine, not indicating anything on my own, just kind of what you've shared. You had a challenging environment because of some of the things. You were put in positions where more abuse took place. You end up in a setting where this guy shows up and he says, look, we got to talk, and a relationship begins there where you're taking personal responsibility and personal choice for your actions. Let me ask you this. What do you think it was that caused you to take personal responsibility, to make that choice, to say, I want things to be different?
To change my life?
Yeah.
I was 17, when I was in the county jail, so I was by myself. I had to go to segregation. And throughout the whole process, my mom had just kept crying and crying and crying. So we were expecting like a 6-year sentence, and she called me, I called her, and she was like, you're not coming home. Because we were hoping for house arrest. So she was like, you're not coming home. And they was like, they're going to give you 11 years. And she just broke down crying. And from that moment, and she was just like, we're going to get through this. And I was just like, I don't never want to put her in that position again. And I don't want to come back. I don't want to ever be here again. So I made the decision in the cell that I will never come back to prison. And then, so she said, we'll get through it, and then we prayed, and from that moment on, I would make conducive choices that would line up with my goal. But that was the pain was too great. And it's funny you say that, because the trauma that I experienced before prison, I can't even relate to the pain anymore. Like, I felt nothing, and I was so numb and broken and just hurting so bad. So once I started to, find myself and find God and develop just a little bit, that pain will hurt so much today that I can never if I regress, it would destroy me, because I cannot deal with it because of who I am now. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes absolute sense. You've moved so far beyond what used to be a norm that now you say, if I even get close to it, I can't handle that, and that makes complete sense, because you've taken personal responsibility. When I stop and think about a lot of things, there's some humor that you've had in your life along the way. You got stopped on a moped. Let's talk about that.
Humor. I'm a very funny guy. Yeah. So I was where was I? So I had a job where I had to work from 2 p.m. to 3 a.m. and I had to be at school like at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. till 12. So I'm getting out of school. I went to Ivy Tech for heating and air. So I'm getting out of school and I'm riding my moped, and Speedway Police. He said I didn't have a license. Oh no, I didn't have a license plate. Yeah. So he stopped me and Brian came and took me to the B&B. But I don't see how that lined up with humor.
Oh, it's funny, all right. It's funny. All right.
It was more funny
People are
because this is funny. So on that moped, so for like the first year out, I didn't have a license. I rode a moped, and I got the moped in February. So I got the moped also in Greenwood, and I didn't want to take all the streets back because it's going to take too long. So I took the highway. And traffic was backed up for several miles, but I made it, and that moped got me. This is a funny story too. So I was going to a job interview, and the GPS out in Avon, it starts to get kind of finicky.
Yeah.
So it's a cornfield right here, and the GPS is saying my location is just over there. So I said, well, let's just go through the cornfield. It had rained.
Fantastic. That's a great decision, by the way.
Yeah, I don't ever
Did your mentor advise you on this?
I don't know if I ever told you that. So I got stuck in the mud, and I still went to the job interview covered in mud till I said, look, man, you know why I'm late. But
and you got the job offer, though. Still,
yeah,
right?
that was a job offer. And what was funny was, so that job was a staffing agency, so I didn't even have to interview.
I just had to show up.
But yeah, that moped got me.
Well, it was funny because, you know, I spent, at this time when this incident happens with the moped, I haven't been on the uniform division road since 2005. And so when I got the phone call that this uniformed officer in Speedway had pulled him over, and the officer was pretty fair in the sense of he didn't tow your moped. He allowed you to leave it here at a barber shop.
Right.
So Ramil called me and he's like, man, they're yelling at me about I need a license plate. And I'm sitting here at lunch with a couple of our officers, and I'm going, do we have to have license plates on mopeds in Indiana? Oh, we do? Okay. All right. We'll figure this out. So, I signed off duty, so I was now on my personal time. I drove over there, and we did. We went to the house and got the paperwork. We went back to the BMV and kind of worked that process through to get the plate. We went back and screwed the license plate back on, and off he went. But, you had a choice, right? I mean, you even had a choice at that time. You could have waited till the officer went around the corner, he's gone, and then jump back on it and go.
Which I thought about.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, but the consequences outweigh the risk.
Yeah.
Or the.
Yeah.
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 It's not something that just aren't worth it anymore.
Sure.
Well, and it's, one of the things I truly love about your story is how much that you have overcome, all right? And it comes from choice. But one of the choices is who you're going to let into your life. And you said in the jail experience, you said, after that, coming out of that, I didn't trust white people, didn't want to be around. And you made a choice at some point in time to let Brian be a part of your life. This same guy who played a role in you going, you said, look, now I'm going to let him back into my life and let him pour into my life and make a difference. And that's an absolute incredible choice that you've made. What helped you make that choice?
I think Brian's character made it easy because from the beginning, he's been consistent with every interaction. Through the compassion, through the consistency and demeanor, he just always treated me as a human. So it was easy to ask him. I was just sitting here thinking about it because when he was talking about goodwill, it surprised me also because when I recognized him, I got happy. And it was just, out of the blue. I was like, oh, Detective Brian. Well, he had got promoted since then, so he wasn't Detective Brian anymore. But I just knew I needed a mentor, and I knew that I could trust him.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We're gonna go ahead and wrap things up for the evening. And we're going to have more of a conversation with both of you in the future because I think that it speaks to a lot of different things that we need to hear. And one of the things that we need to hear is that there's good people out there that are coming together and putting aside differences, that have obvious differences. They come from different walks of life, have different experiences, but you overcome some of those things. One of the things that I just want to kind of speak to, and I'm going to in a moment, but is there anything that you would like to share as we just kind of wrap some things up this evening?
I think the only thing I would just, kind of as we wrap it up, is just talk about is to understand that people that hear his story, people that understand the specifics of his story, I don't know of anyone that hasn't found something consistent in their life that they can compare that to, and seeing people listen to his story. We've presented at Citizens Academies in Avon, and we even went down to one in Southern Indiana to present as well. People are just overcome with the emotion, and that means there's that connection. He's able to connect with people to that level. And I think while it's nice to hear the story and it's nice for people to reflect, I think the thing that I've noticed the most from everybody that's watched his story is an appreciation for the courage that it takes to be sitting on this stage tonight to share this story, this courage that it takes to fly down to Baton Rouge and talk about arguably the worst decision he's ever made in his entire life, to talk about the trauma as a young child, to talk about all of the issues. A lot of us would probably compartmentalize that, and we're okay not talking about it again, because we would feel embarrassment, we'd feel shame, we'd feel judgment. And for me, it's just the courage. So again, I always talk about, I admire your courage, to have the opportunity to be a voice for other people from whichever perspective they choose to have. And that, to me, that courage is what led you to where you're at today. And so I think that's an important part for me to talk about. Absolutely.
Ramil, I admire your courage as well, and I'm going to tie that in just a moment. Are there any words you would like to share as we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, I want to add, when we spoke about weakness, demonstrating weakness is the ultimate humility, which is, I believe, is the ultimate strength. It wasn't weakness to ask for help, as some people may view it. Being humble makes you better. But in regards to the purpose of hope and good people and bad people, we will share this story again, and I really want people to hear it, because if you can name it, I've probably been through it. Yeah. And to see an example of someone overcoming something that you can overcome also will make you a better person.
Absolutely. So for those of you that are just kind of gathering and watching with us, don't check out just yet, all right? What we've witnessed this evening and what has been shared really is a story of courage. Two individuals from different walks of life putting themselves out there, putting their experiences out there, putting their common bond out there, and being able to demonstrate to us that being willing to look past differences, being willing to say, I need help, and being willing to say, yes, I will help, and each one invest in the other, has made a tremendous difference, not only in their life, but here's what we're learning. It's making a difference in the lives of others. One of the things that I love about Brian's life, and I love about Ramil's life, is even though they have come from different walks of life, one of the things that we see is what the Apostle Paul teaches us in Galatians chapter 3 in verse number 28. And it just says this: there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. That's something that we need to build upon. What unites us, what brings us together in the church as Christ followers is Christ. We all have differences. We all have a different background. We all come from a different walk of life. And that's going to be true for every one of us. But one of the things that has brought them together is their past, but a common bond that is shared in Christ. Something else that we really learn from their story is the courage and the willingness to put themselves out there. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus speaks about the Good Samaritan. And in the story of the Good Samaritan, we see someone who's on the road to Jericho, someone who is literally just beaten up, by thieves and robbers, and he's left there on the side of the road. The priest and the Levite pass him by. And they're symbolic of religion and rules and regulations. They're also kind of symbolic of the good people and the good experiences of life. Yet, here's what happens. A Samaritan, one who's not liked by the Jews. The Samaritan didn't care for the Jews, and the Jews didn't care for the Samaritan. But the Samaritan stops and picks that one up, puts him on his own animal, takes him in, makes a way for him to get care, makes a way for him to have hope and healing, and invests in him and never asks for anything in return. And I think it's incredible when you stop and look at this that, Ramil, you reached out to Brian and said, hey, could you help me? Brian says, absolutely. And both of you are pouring into each other. Brian has poured into you, and Ramil has poured into you, and you both are better for it. And when we stop and look at the story of the Good Samaritan, we have one who's pouring into another, one who can't help him, one who really can't do anything for him on the surface. And if we were to look at things in life, we would say, okay, Brian, you're the assistant chief of police. Ramil, you're trying to put life back together. But what I've heard tonight is this: two people from completely different walks of life. One where you had a stable home, a stable upbringing in a community in southern Indiana that was great. One who didn't have that stable home, didn't have the stable upbringing, lived a life of trauma. But both of you bring your stories and experiences together. Through courage, you pour into each other, and you do something that's making a difference in both of your lives, and it's continuing to shape you. And what I say and what I see tonight is this: we all come from different walks of life. We all can choose to stop for a moment and help that person that's kind of been beat up by life, so to speak, that's maybe not had the opportunities. We can let them know they can make a choice, that they can demonstrate some courage. Because Ramil, you made a choice to overcome some struggles in life, to overcome some serious trauma that a lot of people would not talk about, that a lot of people would not share. You've not even really kind of touched the hem of the garment about your story tonight. We've just kind of thrown some things out there. You know, alcoholism, sexual abuse, ending up in jail, all of those things, coming out of jail with kind of maybe a bitterness and a fear, being around white people. And those experiences for you were real. Brian, you've got some other experiences and not knowing what to expect when you encountered Ramil and what was going to take place. But you see him at Goodwill, you begin to build that relationship and have that mentor relationship. It's just absolutely incredible. And I think that we learned tonight that no matter where we're at in life, we can make the choice to realize that we can move past what's on the exterior. We can get to what we have in common. We can throw the courage out there to say, I'm going to make a choice to get beyond my comfort zone. I'm going to make a choice to move beyond my circumstances today, and we're going to go ahead and choose to make a difference. I love this story. I love what you guys are doing. We want you to continue to share it, and we want you to continue to make a difference and continue to grow in your relationship with one another, your relationship that we have in Christ, and help people to know that there is hope beyond the circumstance that they find themselves in right now. Ramil, you found that hope. That hope has a name. His name is Jesus. Jesus is helped give you the courage to continue to make a difference in your life and to make a difference in the lives of other people. He's doing the same thing in your life, Brian. And I want to thank you guys for being here and being a part of our gathering
Absolutely.
tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to close in prayer. This won't be the last of the story that you hear. We're going to continue to share some of their story as we move forward. But remember that we have a choice. And Ramil has said it tonight. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, you can make the choice for your life to be better, not bitter. You can make the choice to take personal responsibility and say, look, I'm going to own it. I'm going to move beyond where I am at, regardless of what that might be. and you can find hope beyond the circumstance that you're in. And I want you to know tonight that that hope starts with a personal relationship with Christ. And if you'd like to know more about that, reach out to us. You can send us an email at harmony@harmonyofavon.com. You can ask for help right now. Just type it in, whatever messenger chat form you're watching on one of our live streams on our online campus. We have someone that's right there monitoring that would love the opportunity to help you and to pray with you and to be a part of that with you. Let's go ahead and close in prayer this evening. Father, I come to you today, and Lord, I thank you for Ramil. I thank you for Brian. I thank you for the friendship that they have. I thank you for the opportunity to be a friend to both of them. And Father, I pray that you will just let us see some positive things in their relationship for the time that we find ourselves in, to let our world know that this kind of relationship can work. It is possible. It does take place. And I pray that you will help us to know that you are real, that you can make a difference in our hearts and in our lives. And Father, that hope is found in you, and it begins with you and continues with you. Father, I pray that you'll continue to bless Ramil and that you'll help him grow in you and learn more about you, and help Brian to pour into his life. And Father, help each and every one of us to see that we can make a choice, that we can take personal responsibility. And Father, we can move beyond wherever we're at right now, right here today, by letting you work in our life. Father, please work in the life of our nation and help us to be more of what you want us to be as a country, as people, and as individuals that we call this place that we know as America home. Help us to make it a better place because of who you are in our lives. For it's in Christ's name we ask it. Amen. Amen. Thanks for being with us tonight on Harmony at Home. You have a great week.